Even the most protected place on Earth isn't truly safe. That is the uncomfortable, almost terrifying truth that this incident has revealed to the entire world. For decades, the area around the White House has been seen as one of the most secure zones not just in America, but globally. It is surrounded by layers of protection: Secret Service, police, National Guard, surveillance systems, armed patrols, barricades, intelligence monitoring, and rapid response units on constant standby. It is the physical symbol of American power, authority, and safety. People walk past it every day with the belief that nothing can possibly happen there. Parents bring their children to see it. Tourists take photos in front of it. Journalists report from just steps away from it. It is supposed to be untouchable. And yet, violence still managed to reach its borders. That realization alone should make everyone stop and think. Because if an attack can happen near the White House, in one of the most guarded and prepared areas on the planet, then what does that say about the rest of the world? What does that say about the safety of regular streets, schools, malls, celebrations, and everyday communities that don't have even 1% of that level of protection? This is not just a story about a shooting. This is a story about a broken sense of security that millions of people around the world were quietly holding on to. For years, we've been told that security is stronger, technology is smarter, surveillance is sharper, and threats can be neutralized before they happen. We were taught to believe that certain places are too important, too powerful, and too well guarded to ever be touched by violence. The idea was comforting. It helped people sleep at night. It gave them confidence in leadership and in protection systems. But this event shattered that belief in a way no theory ever could. What makes this even more disturbing is the psychological impact. When violence strikes in a random area, people grieve, feel fear, and then distance themselves by thinking, that couldn't happen here. But when violence happens right beside the symbol of a nation's protection, there's no here and there anymore. The distance disappears. There is no safe fantasy left to hide behind. The mind starts asking questions it never wanted to ask before. Am I really safe? Are my loved ones safe? Are my children safe at school? Is any place truly secure anymore? This is how one incident turns into a global feeling of uncertainty. And it's important to understand something very clearly. The danger is not just in the bullets that were fired. The danger is also in the message it sends to the world. It tells criminals, extremists, and unstable individuals that nothing is truly unreachable. It tells them that even the heart of a superpower can be shaken. That kind of message can inspire fear, but it can also inspire more violence. And that is what makes this moment so serious and so critical. At the same time, it should also serve as a wake-up call for governments, security agencies, and communities everywhere. It proves that security must constantly evolve. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. Threats change. Methods change. Motives change. And if protection systems do not change faster, they will always be one step behind those who wish to harm. But let's go even deeper than technology and tactics. Let's talk about the human side of this. People in uniform, trained to protect others, became victims themselves. These are not just statistics. They are sons, daughters, siblings, friends. They chose to stand on guard duty, not knowing that their lives would be changed forever in a matter of seconds. That is a sacrifice most people never fully understand. And when even the protectors are not protected, something is seriously wrong. This forces us to question more than just safety. It forces us to question the emotions and frustrations growing in society. Because violence like this does not come from nowhere. It comes from broken minds, broken systems, unresolved conflict, or deep-rooted resentment. The truth is uncomfortable, but it must be faced. If societies do not address mental health, social alienation, trauma, extremist influence, and unchecked anger, then no amount of armed security will ever be enough. Walls can be climbed, guards can be bypassed, cameras can be avoided, but a healed society, a more aware society, and an emotionally healthier society, that is much harder to destroy. In a strange way, this painful moment is also a moment of choice for humanity. We can respond with only fear, more weapons, and more division. Or we can respond with wisdom, understanding, reform, and prevention. The road we choose will define the kind of world our children grow up in. Do they grow up in a world that expects violence everywhere, or a world that actively works to reduce it? And that choice does not belong only to governments. It belongs to every citizen, every parent, every teacher, every content creator, every viewer watching this video right now. What we normalize, what we ignore, and what we stand against becomes the future's reality. So when I say, even the most protected place on Earth isn't truly safe, I am not saying this to spread panic. I am saying it to spread awareness. Awareness that safety is not something we can take for granted. Awareness that systems must improve. Awareness that people matter. And awareness that silence is dangerous. Because when we stop caring, when we stop questioning, when we stop demanding better, that's when the darkness feels most comfortable to return. Maybe this incident will be remembered as a tragic day, but it could also be remembered as the day the world woke up, the day illusions shattered, the day people realized that real safety doesn't come only from guns and guards. It comes from justice, awareness, stability, compassion, and responsibility. And if even one person watching this video chooses to be more aware, more careful, more empathetic, or more vocal about change, then this message will not be in vain. Behind every headline are real human lives. And that is the part of stories like this that too many people forget. When we scroll through our screens and see words like shooting, victims, fatalities, or injured, our minds often translate those words into numbers instead of names, faces, families, and futures. But every single one of those words represents a real person who woke up that day thinking it was just another ordinary day. Someone who had plans. Someone who was loved. Someone who mattered. A 20-year-old National Guard member who never imagined her life would end during a routine deployment in the Capitol. A 24-year-old soldier who left home expecting to protect others, now lying in a hospital bed, fighting for survival. Parents who receive phone calls that no parent should ever have to answer. Friends refreshing their phones, hoping for better news. Siblings unable to believe that someone they just spoke to days ago might be gone forever. And it doesn't stop there. There are paramedics who ran into danger. Doctors and nurses who worked desperately to save lives. Bystanders who witnessed it all and now carry those images in their minds. Children who heard the sirens, who saw the blood, who will grow up remembering that moment even if they don't fully understand it right now. Trauma that does not announce itself immediately. It grows silently. It stays in the back of the mind long after the crime scene is cleaned up and the news trucks leave. This is the invisible damage that doesn't make headlines. When the charts and updates move on to the next big story, the families of the victims stay right there. They sit in the empty chairs at the dinner table. They scroll through old text messages. They remember birthdays, inside jokes, and dreams that will never come true. They don't get to move on in a day or a week. They carry the weight of that loss for the rest of their lives. It is easy to talk about security, suspects, laws, and political arguments. But the truth is, none of that can bring back a life that has been lost. None of that can fully heal the hole left in a family's heart. That is why it is so important that we don't just focus on the crime. We must focus on the cost. Because violence is not only physical, it is emotional, it is psychological, it is generational. One life lost can affect dozens of others. Parents grow old with grief. Friends carry survivor's guilt. Communities lose a sense of peace. Trust is broken. And when enough incidents like this happen, society as a whole begins to harden. People become more afraid, more suspicious, more distant from one another. Empathy slowly fades, replaced by survival mode. This is how fear spreads, even faster than any virus ever could. That is why the human stories behind a tragedy are more powerful than any statistic. When we hear ages, faces, names, dreams, everything becomes real. It stops being a story and starts feeling personal. And maybe that discomfort is necessary, because comfort is what allows these patterns to continue. When we feel the pain, we are forced to care. When we care, we are forced to change. And we must not forget the fact that those who wear uniforms are not machines. They are not invincible. They are young people, often barely out of their teenage years, asked to stand in harm's way to protect strangers they will never meet. They do it because they believe in duty. They do it because they believe in something bigger than themselves. And yet, behind the uniform are simple human needs: love, safety, family, and a future. When someone like that becomes a victim, it should shake every person who benefits from their service. You and I wake up, go to work, go to school, walk freely, speak freely, because someone else stands guard. Someone else volunteers to be in danger, so we don't have to be. When that system fails, even once, we owe it to them to pay attention. And the painful truth is, this is not an isolated story. It is part of a larger pattern of violence that keeps repeating across cities, countries, and generations. Different locations, different backgrounds, different weapons, but the same heartbreak, the same empty chairs, the same funerals, the same headlines, the same tears. What changes each time are the names. And that is the part that should haunt us the most. Because one day, those names could belong to someone we know. So the real question is not, how many were injured? The real question is, how many more must suffer before we truly act? Not just with laws, but with awareness, education, mental health support, conflict resolution, community healing, and responsibility in our online and offline behavior. Violence does not start with a weapon. It starts with thoughts, with isolation, with anger, with hatred, with pain that nobody listens to, with a system that overlooks warning signs, with a world that moves too fast to notice the quiet suffering right in front of it. If we truly want to honor the victims of tragedies like this, we must do more than remember their names. We must create a world in which fewer names are added to that list every year. And that begins with us, with our voice, with our platforms, with our conversations, with our willingness to say, enough, and to actually mean it. So when you listen to this story, don't just let it pass through your ears. Let it reach your heart, because behind every headline are real human lives. And real human lives deserve more than to be forgotten after the next news cycle. They deserve to be the reason we change. What hits me the hardest about a situation like this isn't just the sound of the chaos, or the flashing lights, or the cameras gathering around another breaking story. It's the silence that comes afterward. That deep, uncomfortable silence that settles over a city like Washington, D.C., a place that is supposed to represent stability, power, protection, leadership. And when something violent happens even close to a symbol as strong as the White House, that silence isn't just in the streets. It's in people's minds. It's in their homes. It's in their hearts. Because suddenly, the unthinkable feels possible. People don't just see an incident like this as a single event. They see it as a message, a warning, a fracture in the feeling of safety. You could be sitting in another state, another country even, watching the news on your screen, and yet you still feel closer to danger. That's the psychological impact of violence tied to powerful places. The White House isn't just a building. For many people, it represents order, control, security. So when an attack happens within its shadow, the mind instantly asks if it can happen there. Can it happen anywhere? That's how fear spreads. Not through facts alone, but through perception. Parents start to worry when their children leave for school. People grow more suspicious of crowds, of strangers, of unusual sounds. Even normal city noise starts to feel different. And that change, that emotional shift, is one of the most dangerous long-term effects of violent incidents, because it eats away at what holds society together: trust, peace, confidence in the future. And I believe that this is where the real conversation needs to begin. Not just about who did it or how it happened, but about why we keep reaching this point. What is happening inside a society when an area protected by the strongest security on Earth can still feel vulnerable? What does that say about mental health, social pressures, extremism, desperation, anger, and the growing disconnectedness in our world? We live in a time where people feel unheard, ignored, trapped, and while that never justifies violence, it does explain why these events continue. There's a sickness in isolation, a sickness in hate, a sickness in hopelessness. And when those feelings aren't treated, when they're ignored, when they're laughed at or exaggerated online, they can turn into something tragic. And so, what happens next matters more than what already happened. The real story isn't just the shooting. The real story is how people respond. We've seen it before. Communities come together. Strangers help strangers. People donate blood. Churches, mosques, synagogues, temples open their doors. Candlelight vigils glow in the darkness. And for a moment, humanity shines through the fear. But then time passes. News stations move on. Social media finds a new trend. Politicians stop talking. And the same vulnerable cracks remain unhealed. That is what has to change. If there's one powerful message to take from a moment like this, it's this: awareness must turn into action. Real change doesn't come from hashtags. It doesn't come from temporary outrage. It comes from uncomfortable conversations, better systems, and serious investment in prevention. Stronger support for mental health, better community engagement, more awareness programs in schools, earlier intervention, more accountability, and a serious look at how society handles anger before it turns into tragedy. We have to create a world where people don't feel like violence is the only way to be seen or heard, where individuals are supported before they break, where warning signs are taken seriously instead of ignored, where we talk about pain instead of hiding it. And that is why channels like Crime Alert 24 matter. Not because we glorify crimes, but because we force people to look at reality. We make them think. We make them uncomfortable. And sometimes, uncomfortable thoughts are the beginning of something better. Because maybe, just maybe, one person watching this video right now will choose empathy over anger tomorrow. One person might reach out instead of acting out. One parent might pay closer attention to their child. One friend might check in. One leader might push for change. And that's how the world begins to heal. One decision at a time. So when you look at Washington, D.C., don't just see a city shaken by a headline. See a warning sign. See a lesson. See a chance. A chance to rebuild not just security systems, but human connection. A chance to ask ourselves the hard question: what kind of world are we creating? And what kind of world do we actually want to live in? Because safety isn't just about guards and fences. It's about understanding. It's about compassion. It's about prevention. And that word belongs to all of us.